Today we're going to be going over Ivanti's new release called Asset Manager Essentials. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, if this is the first time you're seeing it, I need to kind of take a step back and talk a little bit about, asset management with Ivanti in the past. Landesk had Asset Central that was on the Landesk Service Desk platform. This is a new release on the new Service Manager platform that came from the Heat side of Ivanti. And so there's so many great advantages of that, and I'm going to talk through a little bit about that as we go through. But one of the great things is this is cloud-based, right? So we don't need any kind of premise software installed, any of that kind of stuff. It's all cloud, it's all hosted, it's all taken care of as part of that, right? And so you'll see here a couple of key things as we're going forward. This is focused specifically on Asset Manager and on Asset Manager Essentials, the Essentials being a Asset Manager product that is highly configured out of the box, right? Ivanti has gone through and spent painstaking months building this all around ITAM best practices, meeting with customers and saying, what do you guys need in an out-of-the-box functionality right from there, right? And then from that perspective, it's also a lockdown configuration side of it. So you don't have to go through and build out great, big, long, weeks-long projects to get this stood up and going. You're looking at something that I haven't done anything other than said, load some demo data into this. Now, understand this is new, so I don't have tons of demo data, but the great thing about this is it's a rapid return on investment, rapid ROI that you can really get into Asset Manager, right? So configured cloud, set out of the box, and really managed by Ivanti and their best practices team. If there's something that lots of customers say that needs to get done, then they can go ahead and put it in, and you guys don't have to manage or configure it in on the back end. Obviously, you got to use the tool and set up your assets to go into it and all of that kind of stuff, but it's not something that is, long configuration of professional services or any of that kind of stuff. So it's very good for a lot of customers that just need to get into asset management and get something moving, because this is probably, in a lot of our customers, one of the things that's been neglected for so long with lots of different organizations, because it's not somebody's key focus or whatever it happens to be as we go through from there. So we're going to start with assets, but this thing is a lot bigger than just assets, and don't fool that it's an essentials product. It's not some stripped down, can't do anything kind of product. It's a full suite capable of having, all kinds of different assets catalogs, POs, invoices, shipment tracking, contract management, all here in, this great new solution. So as we come in and look at this, first thing I want to talk about is, hey, we're looking at the asset management dashboard. What kind of assets do we have? Who's owning those assets from an organizational configuration? Where are the different assets at from, storage versus our corporate office versus different offices that I have configured into here? And then what are some things that, hey, we haven't seen this particular asset in 30 days or whatever that happens to be, so we're not getting any kind of updates on that, right? So a quick view of that. Also can see, where are things in their life cycle? Again, I'm brand new, so I've got some components in here that are in different stock and order and production and assigned. Don't have anything that I've disposed of yet, but if I had disposed of something without having the appropriate records, it would then show me that, and then see that I've got some assets that are on order, and we'll kind of track through that as we kind of go along from here. Each one of these, we're going to come back to some of these other dashboards like procurement and contract management a little bit later as we get into those sections of the product demo. So let's start with that very first part of this, and that's our asset repository, right? So the asset repository comes up and shows all of the different assets by type that we have. To start, you'll notice I've got some desktops, some laptops, some servers, some contracts, some software products, all in here that we're kind of working through. So if we go ahead and open up, let's just take one of these particular computers, and then we can start to see some of the details around it. Now you'll notice there was some options up here along the top. This is going to tell us some of the things that we can do to move that asset along its life cycle. Check it in, meaning we received it from a shipment, assign it to a user, assign it to a location, assign a financial owner that might be separate from the actual user along those lines, and kind of work through from there. And so let's kind of talk about what's in there as we go through and look at this. First of all, we get, asset tag and serial number, so we can start to track some of the kind of details on that. Add a picture of that kind of asset, then looking through it at asset subtype, in this case a desktop. We've got a catalog item. Now this is interesting because the catalog item is allowing us to say, if you're going to request something from the catalog, I want to request a Dell 5675, that is, our standards catalog of what our users can request from us, or what assets we can deploy out to employees in the business. And then that catalog item will show us all of the different assets that are related to that. And the catalog item gets a lot more detail, and I'll go to the catalog item kind of next in this, but the catalog item gives us a lot of capabilities, and then having alternate components for the catalog and different things associated with that. Then we can get into, model, part number. Now you'll see some of these things as we're on the details is going to start to say assigned and assigned user and assigned location. All of that kind of stuff is going to be here. The reason it's going to say assigned there is because we also have a discovery, and the discovery is going to use things like Endpoint Manager or other things that we're using to discover these assets in the organization to say what information do we have about that, right? And you'll see again, the same values is detailed are going to show up here in the assigned values, and then anything that we have that's allowing us to see the discovered values. So we're saying it should be assigned to Craig, but if we come in here and start to see that the last person that logged in wasn't Craig, maybe we've got something that Craig's given it to somebody else, or whatever it happens to be, where the last location was. Now, sometimes we've got you'll see over here, there's another option that's in this that is our subnet mapping. The subnet mapping allows us to go through and say, hey, if it shows up with this IP address, automatically associated with the following location, right? So this is going to help us see where was the last location that popped up, because we all know assets tend to move as they get as our employees travel throughout the business and all that kind of stuff.
Hey Brian, quick question.
Sure.
Someone's asking about they track automobiles as assets. How can we pass the asset from one user to another during the role change?
Yeah. So as we go through any kind of assets that's there, we can go ahead and assign this a user, right? And I can go say, assign this to a particular user, and it would go change to the location as to where that user is, and then what user that's going to go to. And so we can assign that to whatever employee is part of that. And we can make more of those kind of options, and kind of work through what is going to be location, who it's going to be assigned to from there.
And then also a quick question about licensing. Is Asset Manager Essentials different license from ISM?
It is. It's a different license. Today, it's a different instance than ISM. So if you have an ISM instance in the cloud today, this would be a different instance. They are going to be working on releasing Asset Manager Cloud a little bit later, a couple months from now, that will be able to be integrated into a full ISM instance up in the cloud. So then you can have one instance that does both.
Great. And I think you're going to talk about the importing of files. Can a manufacturer provide a file with our computer purchase history, and can we import it into the inventory?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, let me come over here. I'll just quickly show that, because you'll notice when I come over here to the configuration, it's going to tell me, hey, you have, you can't go make lots of configuration changes, but what you can do is see that there is a bunch of imports that are already set up for asset types and catalogs and consumables and contracts and all of these kind of things. These are all spreadsheets that are built so that they can be uploaded and brought into that. And so you have these are templates that you will get as a customer, and then all of the details from that template then you can go through and work with and upload into there. Okay, so from here we go through and look at our discovered value. We can see installed software. Now you'll see, again, I don't have all of this filled out, so I don't have the installed software on this particular asset, but you would be able to get that information. We're going to be able to see, other assets that are linked to this or can be related to that from here, relationships that this asset has. Now from a desktop, that's not going to be such a big thing, but we can get contracts to different components, all the different things associated with that, as well as relationships of upstream and downstream assets and how they're set from there. I can go ahead and link to contracts, right? And so this particular asset doesn't have a contract. We can look at some here in a little bit that do, or I could just go and link to an existing contract that we have, right? Find a particular contract and then kind of work that through and link that up from here. So we'll see, let's say we've got a purchase contract here. I can go ahead and link that one too, and then it starts to go through and be able to be managed in that contract and all the different components and relationships from there. I also have a vendor, so we track all of the different vendors along this line. So you'll see here, this vendor is Dell, right, on this particular laptop, all the different components associated with that. It's going out and pulling all the details from Dell around here. Now I can go to Dell, right, and go see more information, but I've also just got a quick view of that from here. I also have a vendor scorecard, and this is really nice. For anyone who works with, vendors over time, you can start tracking how that vendor is performing for you on different components. So on this particular asset, let's say I have an interaction with that vendor, I can come in here and say, yeah, I want to give that vendor a scorecard based upon some particular component in here. So we can come in and say, hey, this is a, acceptable communication with them, and it was good reliability, the quality was good, the customer service was, good, and, the pricing, maybe the pricing was poor on whatever we have to put in there, overall good, right? And then that goes and starts tracking that entire vendor over time. So we start seeing how many interactions we have with the vendor and then what kind of quality interactions were with that vendor. And then we'll see the vendor scorecard actually over time back here. You'll actually see here we have a vendor scorecard dashboard, so we can start to track where are our vendors and how are they performing from there.
We do have a few questions on being able to pull in the data, Brian.
Sure.
Will it interface with CGI to retrieve asset information?
No, I think it's not going to pull in asset from a script like that. It's going to be, spreadsheet based for this release.
Okay, and then somebody also asked about SCCM. They get some data from SCCM. Is it possible to pull the inventory into Asset Manager from there?
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so kind of coming back to the asset, now we start to get some finance and finance transaction components, right? So we want to start tracking some more of the finance components on here. A couple of things that this does, right? We've got purchase orders where we can track individual purchase orders that were associated with the procurement of this particular asset. We've also got life cycle of the financials, and it will do out of the box straight line depreciation of those assets. We can allocate a financial owner, set it to a fixed P&L, what's the salvage value, what's the market value, what's the depreciated value of that particular asset. So then we can track all of the different finance components to the asset as well. So, IT asset management is very much about the assets and the different components that we're dealing with the assets, and it's about security because we can't secure what we don't know we have, but we can't leave out the financial aspects of it. When did we buy it? How much did we pay for it? What kind of warranty does it have? What's the depreciation? All of the different finance components hit onto this as well, right? And then you'll see we'll have financial transactions. And I can go through with financial transactions and say, hey, we did a purchase. When we get to the integration for Service Manager and Asset Manager together in one cloud, then you'd also be able to see support costs being put onto this particular asset as well and start to be able to track from those components on there. So lots of good capabilities, being able to go and link into financial transactions and kind of working through from there. And then I want to show you this part, because we said this is not a configurable tool. Asset Manager Essentials is, locked down on the back end for you to go in and build your own attributes and that kind of stuff. So there are some components where you can put in, some of your own custom attributes and then go through and, play with those with whatever you want. So, 10 different custom attributes with also some checkboxes, some date and time, currency, and a number value. So this is where you could put some custom attributes about something. If there's some value that Ivanti hasn't thought of or didn't put in that you need, you can use these custom attributes to build and work with those different components. Take a quick break, John, see if there's any more questions.
Yeah, there's a few here. We use a hybrid SCCM LAN desk environment. I heard it will connect with SCCM. He's asking, will it integrate will Ivanti connect with LAN desk? But that's one and the same. So maybe I think he means will Ivanti connect with SCCM?
Yeah, it will connect with SCCM and Ivanti is my understanding. Yep, at this point. Yep.
Okay, and then have you heard, let's see, Orion? Will it connect with Orion? A lot of questions about getting the assets into the system.
Yes, my understanding is that you can go through and connect to the kind of the three built-in ones, which are Ivanti, SCCM, and Orion. From that, anything else has to be done through spreadsheets.
I think that's it for now.
What I want to talk about next is that product catalog. The product catalog allows us to go through and define what our standard configurations are that we're going to go through and look at. So in this case, our product catalog item of this Dell Inspiron 17-5000, right, we're going to go through and look at a couple of different things, right? First of all, it's going to have a status and who requested that this be added to the catalog. We're going to see that it's going to have, our item name and description details, and then what are the details about that particular item? Manufacturer, model, weight, asset type, all can be put in there, right? And then it's a standard catalog item that people can request from the service catalog. You'll notice that service requests are part of this offering. So if you don't have a request catalog or service catalog today, and you just have Asset Manager Essentials, you do have a request catalog that users can go in and request assets and stuff associated from there. And then you'll see here that we have 15 different assets for this product catalog, right? Some of them are assigned and others are in stock awaiting for us to assign them. And that's where the stock level comes in. The stock level allows us to see where these devices are in our organization and say, okay, we have, 10 different, or eight of them in the London office, 2 of them in our 4th floor storage room, right? And in the corporate office, we also have 3 of them. So if I get a request from somebody from the corporate office, I could go ahead, take one of these, and then go to that particular asset and assign them to that particular user. And you see, I've got it right here where I can go in and assign it to a user, assign it to a location, right from where I'm at in the product catalog. So if I get a request for one of these items, I can see what I have available to fulfill that request and kind of go through from there. I would also be able to see what active orders we have out for this. So we have a purchase order, it's going to Dell, right? We have the status associated with that, we have a cost per item, we have 3 of them on this particular purchase order that we're working through. Right? And that will take me right into the purchase order where I can see all of the information from here. So now we've got a purchase order, right? Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't need to be a purchase order system, right, for you. You can go through and have this link in with your purchase orders that you're getting and all that kind of stuff so that, everyone who has purchase order systems, go use those, and then we just kind of integrate those purchase orders into here. Anyone who doesn't have a purchase order system, sure, we could go through and have this do some purchase orders for us, but not really what it's designed for. Primarily, it's to go link into the purchase orders, bring those in, and then we see, okay, here's the purchase order, here's the cost, the invoice component associated with it, here's the line item of what we've ordered on that purchase order. Maybe there's 10 different line items on them, right? And then we can start to see all the details about the purchase order. What vendor did it go to? Again, we've got a vendor scorecard. So whenever we're looking at a vendor, then we're relating a vendor scorecard so we can keep track of the interactions that we're having with them. Then we would be able to see, here are the assets, right? And this can go through and tell us we have some assets that are assigned to that. Maybe they're still, pending receiving or any of that kind of stuff. Here's an invoice that came in based upon that purchase order, so we can track both the invoice and the purchase order on here. Then we see what the shipment was, so we can see who the shipper is, the tracking number. So if we need to track any of that kind of stuff, we can put that in there. And this is great because there's also an Android-based dedicated app for scanning of barcodes. It doesn't go on an Android phone, it goes on an Android-based barcode scanner, right? And then you can go in and scan shipments to say we've received them, and it won't let you process through an invoice until you've received all of the different POs, you know, all that kind of stuff. So you can control and see, okay, we've ordered 3, but we've only received 2. We need to be able to track where those other ones are at and kind of work through from there. Tracking multiple shipments, we can go through and have all of that in there as well. So that goes to the purchase order. Kind of stepping back to the catalog item, that's where the purchase orders of all the different things, and you know, as we go through and have more and more orders and that kind of stuff, we'll get lots of POs associated with this catalog item. We'll get, where can we buy this from? I can either buy this from CDW or from Dell, right? And then we have suggested alternatives, because what if we're out of stock of this particular thing that they've requested and we don't want to wait for it to come in stock or whatever? So now we're saying, here's an alternative catalog item to this one. So if somebody requests the 17-inch, the 17 is out, we can go ahead and replace that with the 15-inch and kind of go through from there, right? And so that would take us right to, we went and looked at that 15-inch catalog item. Now you're able to go through and see all of the different details from there, right? Again, here's the assets for that. Here's the vendors that we can get the 15-inch from. And then there's also, and now it's going the reverse, right? If we're out of stock of the 15, we could, you know, link that up to that 17-inch version. Okay, John, I'll do a quick pause and see what I missed on questions.
Yeah, can you touch on the barcode scanning? Some questions about how to, you know, import the information. They've got a lot of barcodes. Can we scan them in?
Yeah, the barcode scanner, again, it's an Android-based dedicated barcode scanner that then links that up to this, and then the barcodes can trigger actions. So you can assign users, you can assign, hey, it's been received at a particular location, so it can be put in a particular stock room, all that kind of stuff. The barcode can then go in and capture that kind of detail from here.
And then a question about importing from an ERP system like PeopleSoft or SAP. Do we import those via spreadsheet, or how can we import that information?
Yeah, that's going to have to come through spreadsheet.
Okay.
So some kind of systematic export and import would be the best way to go through and do that.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
So we looked at purchase orders, right? And we were able to see all the different purchase orders. You'll notice the purchase orders are blank because the default query is those things that are my assigned purchase orders. But here's all the purchase orders that we have. You know, if we were to go look at something that has a little bit more cost in here, we could go look at this, you know, server-based purchase order, where we've got a total cost and then an invoice total that's going to be calculated based upon a couple of different invoices that have come in, right? And so we're seeing what the PO total was versus what the invoice amount is being set to along those lines. Then I've got all the different assets that are coming through along those lines, as well as shipments that are coming in from each one of those different components, and then tracking the different shipments available to do that here. The purchase order has the details. Then we have the invoices that come in. Obviously, purchase orders and invoices are separate, but are related, right? So if I go through and look at any one of these particular components, let's go look at this $16,000 invoice. So here's the invoice. We can also relate that shipment to an invoice, so we're not paying for a shipment that we haven't received yet from an invoicing perspective. We want to make sure that we get those assets in, right, before we can go ahead and release it. And then we're linking the assets to the invoice that it's being paid and all that kind of stuff. And you'll see once we have that, we can go ahead and say add all the PO assets. You know, so the linked PO then could come in here and have all of those assets from that PO linked to this invoice from there. So invoice is really the shipments and the assets that are associated with it, and then the related PO that we're working with. With all of that, then we have the shipments that we're working through, right? So here's all of the different shipments, and when a shipment comes in, we can go through, enter in a particular shipment. Here's the shipper, here's the shipment number, here's the tracking number that might be separate. Where are we going to go through and track it? You'll notice with the tracking link, we also have the link out to be able to go ahead and track out to those details from the tracking number and tracking website that you go through. Hey, signatures required, and then we can go through and start to track all the different components from that. So here, this one coming through FedEx, right? So then we've got 3 different laptops that are linked to this particular shipment, right? And then we can add those all to an invoiced components, so we can link that shipment to the invoice. Quick question on any of those different components from the PO to the invoice to the shipment?
Not on that, but more about licensing, how it's licensed. Is it based on the number of assets or users?
Yes. So Asset Manager Essentials is licensed per asset, and there's kind of a tiering band to it. So you come in at the very base product price, and it includes up to 10,000 assets. And then if you need more than 10,000 assets, they're sold in 10,000 bundles. And the higher you go in the 10,000 bundles, the more that the asset price can come down and that kind of stuff. But basically, for most of the customers, Asset Manager Essentials is going to be able to be purchased with up to 10,000 assets in that base initial bundle price. So what I want to talk about next is the contracts that we have associated with this, right? So here you'll see some contract components. I've got a contract with Dell, a contract with Microsoft, and then a ABC Computers contract sample. So let's go look at this particular Microsoft contract that we have. Come into the particular contract for this. We've got the details of that. We've got all of the items that are being covered by this contract. In this case, we have a SQL Server license that's being tracked on here. We've got ability to add, line item scorecards to that contract, what are purchase orders that are going to the contract, different components from that, the vendor contract and the details associated with that particular part of it. Let's go back up and let's open the Dell one, right? Because we've got a little bit more information on the Dell. So here's a couple of line items to that. We've got, a laptop, a purchase of some new servers, some maintenance on some new servers for the different costs that are a line item of this particular contract, right? Then we'll be able to see here's a purchase order that was related to this particular contract, so we can start tracking all of the different details. Along that, we can see participants, who's involved in this, who's the contact, who are we working with, how are we negotiating this contract, so who are the key contacts from there. Again, we have that vendor component to that, and then all of the contracts that are associated with that particular vendor are all available here. So we have all this relationship of, assets to vendors, to contracts, to POs, to invoices, to how the vendor is performing, all integrated together and all linked, all of that back and forth. So that takes me over here to a vendor. Right, so if we go look at any one of our particular vendors, let's take Dell in this case, because we have lots of Dell in here. Right, we've got the vendor contact. Who's our primary contact for this? When we have anything, who are we talking to from that vendor? What are the different contracts that we have along those lines? Then notice the catalog items that we are working with that vendor for, right? So all the different catalog items that we're going through and all the details associated with that. All of the assets that we have from that vendor, right, can be linked in from there. Now you'll notice right off the bat, you go, wait a minute, you had 80 Dell laptops in your asset repository and you only have 3 of them linked. Well, that's because I haven't gone in and linked them, right? So I would just come in here and say, we need to link in additional assets from that, or go into any kind of the configuration over on the asset and say, link it to the vendor. Then we have all the purchase orders that we're sending to that vendor. Then we have our contracts associated with our vendor. We have how our vendor's doing from an overall performance. This is coming from all of our scorecards, right? So the scorecards, notice I can't go to a vendor to do a scorecard. The scorecards are more at the interaction with the vendor than at the vendor management level, right? So if I'm the vendor, if I'm managing that vendor, I want to be able to see all the interactions that we're having. And so that's going to be down at the PO and the asset level and all of those kind of levels is where I can add those scorecards. So that's why I did that before, so that you could see all the different components from that. If I have something that I want to attach to this, I can go ahead and add attachments into that vendor. And you'll see there was that attachment tab was there on all of those, but I didn't go in and pull it in for each one. And then all of the actions, whatever it happens to be that we're kind of working through, you'll notice those have all been up here along the top based upon what I was looking at. So if I was looking at an asset, I could check it in, I could assign it a user. If I'm looking at a shipment, then I can link it to the invoiced assets or a purchase order, submit that purchase order. Wherever we're at in those, the actions that we can do to move that particular record along is going to be on there. Okay, John, another quick pause for a question.
Okay, back to the licensing. When you retire assets, will it auto adjust the licenses as you retire PCs or other assets?
No, those are considered assets because ITAM looks at those as assets that we have to track long term. And the fact that they're retired only means that we're moving them into a status of retired and proving that they've been disposed of correctly and all of that kind of stuff. So the assets are assets. Once they're in the system, they are an asset and intended to be an asset until the retirement of the system, essentially.
Got it. Okay. And then how do you attach an invoice?
Yeah, so the invoices are all here. We would just come in here to the invoice. We would have to have the invoice created, whether that's coming in from, any particular component on here. That's the purchase orders. Go back to invoices, right? So look at all invoices, and then as I go through, any one of the different invoices would be attached to a purchase order by coming in here and linking to it this way. So I can do a quick search for purchase orders, link that in there, go ahead and save that, and then that will link it all together and pull that in. You'll notice it'll take a second because it's going in and calculating, invoice costs and putting that against the PO, stuff like that.
Okay. A lot of questions about getting the assets in there originally. Question about hooks or an API. Is there an API or other hooks?
The API is only going to be available in the Asset Manager Cloud version, not in the Essentials version.
Okay.
So the answer is that the platform absolutely has it. The cloud version of this Asset Manager product is going to give us a little more of those kind of capabilities to do more advanced things. The connection to ERP systems or SAP systems or stuff like that, APIs, those are the things that cloud enables as opposed to Essentials. Essentials is really designed more, trying to get it in, out of the box, make it easy, not have lots of configuration and design and professional services. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about a couple of other things associated with this. First of all, I want to come in here and start talking about locations. All right, here's all of the locations that we're going through. So anytime we want to allocate to a location, any of that kind of stuff, it's all going to be available here. I can go in, pull in the details of a particular location, update that value. This can be, there's a spreadsheet to be able to pull in all of our different locations and be able to work through that. You'll notice there's parent locations, so we can have location tiering if we want to go through and look at that. Also, talk about consumables. Right? Asset management is all about that 80-20 rule. When we start talking about where do we want to track assets, right? A lot of organizations will drop that number at, hey, anything over $500 we want to be able to start tracking from an asset financial perspective. Things that are less than $500 pretty much say the juice isn't worth the squeeze along those lines, right? Because asset management takes effort, it takes time, it takes somebody's responsibility to be involved in that. So what do we want to track, right? Well, we want to track those things that are the more expensive stuff, but we still have things that we need to track from an inventory level and a request that are coming in and all of that kind of stuff. And that's what a consumable is, right? So a consumable are things that we're going to get, the mice, the keyboard, maybe even monitors for some organizations, right? Maybe desk side printers would be a consumable. Things that we get requests for on a fairly frequent basis that we're not going to track the entire life cycle of it, but we do want to know how we're doing at the quantity on hand to fulfill requests. And so that's where an example of a consumable comes in, right? So here I've got a mouse consumable. You'll notice in my corporate storage room, I have 30. And then every time we go through and, give out a couple of these, whatever it happens to be, right, then we can go ahead and update our consumables value and start tracking that kind of detail along those lines. So consumables, we don't want to track the life cycle of all 30 of those mice. I just want to be able to track from a storage room perspective, how many do I have to fulfill requests before I got to do new orders and those kind of things along those lines. So consumables brings in that ability to track things that aren't, full life cycle, but we still want to be able to track what we have to meet demand from our customer.
Another quick question, Brian.
Yep.
Can we tie the assets from our Ivanti DSM environment into Asset Manager? Would that be the desktop systems management environment? So the endpoint use?
Not today. So more going to be another one of those cloud options. So from here, now we come into the software products. And here's where we can add software products. Now I want to be very clear here. Ivanti has the license optimizer side of the business, which is meant for license compliance and all the different software license management stuff. Right? That's where we get into the full control and governance around license management. That can then link in here, so we can link to contracts and different components on here. But we're not going to get into all of the different software license levels in Asset Manager Essentials, right? That's all for License Optimizer. So, but here we can see I've got a software product for Illustrator. It can be linked to a contract. It can have entitlements to different components within there. So I can do entitled to different levels. I can go ahead, put it on what assets it's entitled to be linked on, and then kind of work it through from there. So definitely not a full software asset management component, but it does have some light versions of being able to track a quantity for entitlements and then being able to attract the contracts that it's on from a manual perspective. No discovery in here. That's all in License Optimizer and controlling it all from there. And then kind of working through storage spaces is that place where we can start to put, you know, our storerooms, our stock rooms. Where are we going to be fulfilling from this? You know, this is where we're tracking things. Something to come out of the storage room should then be assigned, and I should be able to track, hey, what happened to the 10 desktops that we had in the storage room? Oh, they went to Bill and Nancy and Frank and Evan, and right? So I could be able to track all of that kind of stuff from the storeroom. So when I go to say I want to put something in store or in stock, meaning it's not assigned to a user, but it's available to fulfill requests and that kind of stuff, it would then say, where can I put them in storage? So these are our storage spaces that we have and have different assets allocated and set in there, right? And so these are really locations, but then they become a specific type of location that's there from the storage.
So a good question to go along with that. How could this tool, or are there some reports that can help us with annual physical inventory?
Absolutely, right? So you can come back, you can build, dashboards are things that you can go through and kind of work on and build out, but you don't, it doesn't come with extraction, so you wouldn't be doing extraction kind of level reports on that. But the dashboards can give you all that kind of stuff, and you'll see, you know, things like the procurement dashboard. I could have a asset physical count dashboard to be saying, we want to go through and see what things have we barcode scanned from a physical asset perspective in the last 60 days. And so we create a dashboard that says, you know, every time we go in and do an update from a barcode scan, that it tracks that we sync that, and then have that count down and say, what do we still need to go to and work with, and some of that kind of stuff from there. A couple of other dashboards I want to show you. We've got that stock level. So if I'm getting a request that I need to fulfill, I can see exactly what I have in stock. If I come in here and look at, you know, my Dell 1500s, where are they at, what storage space, and I can see, oh, I've got some in the London space that I can fulfill this request from, whatever it happens to be on there. And then again, here's my product catalog, and then all the assets that I have based upon the product catalog, any products that are waiting approval to be put into the catalog, products that are expiring from the catalog, all of that would be, you know, things that I can see in my catalog overview component. I think this is a good foundation for asset management for a lot of organizations. Again, it is Asset Manager Essentials. It's meant as that quick ROI, stand it up quickly, import from, you know, pre-configured places or asset spreadsheets, and then kind of work through from there. So, John, open it up to any other questions.
There is a question here about that annual physical inventory. Is there a limit to the end users to gain the information and update any changes and adds?
Employees, no. No limit on the number of employees.
Okay.
That can be brought in. And there is a self-service. There is a catalog. Now this catalog, oops, that's not the wrong one. This catalog's coming from ISM, so it doesn't have all the different components in here, right? But you can build out things into the catalog from your product catalog. So this is the service catalog that would just be, you know, able to be integrated into your product catalog.
Okay, and is there a filter to see all the retired assets or a report to show that?
Assets disposed assets, yes.
Okay. Can we track cell phones and iPads? And do we have any current customers tracking cell phones and iPads?
Okay. Well, current customers would be hard because this is brand new. It was released, like 2 weeks ago, right? But we can go through and create any kind of general computer infrastructure, mobile device, and peripheral device. So if you go into new mobile device, you'll notice that there is smartphone, tablet, wearable as the subtypes that you can put in from a mobile asset.
Okay, and are there, let's see, different portals for different types of users? So can we manage the different types of users that we might have in the system and what they can see and what they can't see?
Yes. So here are the different roles that you have, and then each role would have the ability. So I'm logged in as an asset administrator role right now. I can be an asset manager, a scanner, a contract manager, someone from the help desk, procurement manager, report manager, and storage manager. So those are the roles that we have. If I select that I'm a contract manager, you'll notice that I have way different components associated with that. My home dashboard that may be available to me might be a little bit different, right? And then things that I'm looking at from a contract management, contract line items, all of those would be in here, and I wouldn't be involved in all of the other things that are there. I'm not dealing with the repository maybe so much. I'm not dealing with, POs and things like that as much. So yes, role-based, all these built-in roles that are there.
Okay, and then from a training aspect, how long would it take to get a group up to speed and up and running on this? And is there training offered for this?
Ivanti does have some training that's available, and there's I can't remember if it's 3 or 5 off the top of my head, but there is training that's available, and it will take a couple of days to get up to speed, but not a great deal of training. It's not weeks long learning time to go through and get this going.
Okay, reporting and alerting. Is it possible to send out notifications or alert of expiring hardware?
Yes, you can have alerts on different expiring hardware. And then reporting is all done here in terms of the home dashboards and all the different components from here. You'll see I can export these and send those out, do different things associated with that. So the reporting is going to be built into the tool itself without, there's not an external reporting component. And then notifications, yes, we can see, emails can go out from here as well.
Okay, and reports can be exported into Excel or CSV?
Yeah, yep, you can come in here, export that right out to Excel and go from there. And then you also can do that, here at, particular asset repository. I think it's in the more where I can go through and do some of the other actions.
And then you mentioned extraction does not come with this version, but can it come with this, or is it an option?
It's not an option today. It's something that will be available potentially with the cloud version, but that's one of the distinguishing features for their Essentials bundle is it doesn't have extraction, both in the Help Desk Essentials and in the Asset Manager Essentials.
For end-of-year cost analysis, can we see an activity history to determine when an asset changed ownership, maybe between departments?
Yes, all of that stuff is in the activity log of a particular asset. Audit history would show all of that kind of detail.
Okay, I think you've got the hardest question. You're going to have to pick one, Brian, as to the best question of the day.
The question I liked the most was the question that said, can we integrate with ERP and SAP? Because that's a good question and also a good distinction between the Essentials and the cloud version. So I don't know who that was, but that was a great question.
Okay, that was early on there. So can we integrate with the ERP? And I believe a few people actually asked that. So if we have to hand out 2 backpacks, can we do that, Brian?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I see that Linda has asked that question, but if somebody else has asked that question as well, I'll go through the notes here and we will send out a secondary backpack. But Linda B., you're the winner of the backpack. We'll get that out to you. All right, we're good to go, Brian.
Thank you, everyone. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to John, myself, or your NCSI sales rep.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, everyone, for joining the first activity here for the NCSI Summer Webinar Camp, and that's pretty much it. Thanks for joining us today, and feel free to reach out to us at any time if you need anything. Thanks again. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.